Welcome back to Home Learning. This is Computer Science, and today we're looking at Wi-Fi and Ethernet. First off, Mr. Horton's going to tell you a little bit about Wi-Fi and Ethernet, and then you're going to have a task followed by some exam questions reviewed by Mr. Barnes. Over to Mr. Horton.
So let's talk about Wi-Fi and Ethernet, two protocols that you need to know about, which are all to do with how to send data from one place to another. Let's do the easy one first. That is definitely by far Ethernet, because all you really need to know about Ethernet is that it's used for wired connections. So anytime that you have a look at a computer and it's got a network cable sticking out the back of it, chances are, well, almost certainly, it will be using the Ethernet protocol to do that. And all the things that you know about wired connections apply to Ethernet. So the idea that it carries more bandwidth than wireless connections, the idea that it's subject to less interference, that it can go further without losing the signal, that sort of idea, that is all baked into Ethernet as well, because it is a wired connection. Right, that's Ethernet done. That is the easy one. Let's talk about Wi-Fi, a little bit more tricky. So there's a few different things you need to know about Wi-Fi. First thing to know is that it uses radio waves, okay? Same sort of thing that you have in a car. So when you listen to any songs that is broadcast on the radio, Wi-Fi uses the same sort of thing, except it doesn't send songs, it sends data over the airways. And we can think about that data being transferred over the air as waves of data. So let's have a graph that you may have seen in physics. We're going to have frequency sort of down this side, and we're going to have time along the bottom here. All right. So I can send data over the airwaves on this particular frequency. Let's say that's a fairly low frequency there, and that frequency is measured in gigahertz. So let's say it's low number of gigahertz. Same sort of thing that you get in a processor, a hertz. It's the same sort of thing. You're not getting confused. So gigahertz is how we measure frequency of radio waves as well. We say that frequency is the number of times that wave repeats in a particular second. So in this example, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hertz, which is not realistic. It's not how radio signals work. We have a gigahertz range, but you get the idea. The number of times that this signal repeats in a particular second. And like I said, I can send a stream of data, so a stream of zeros and ones over this particular frequency. But the magic thing about Wi-Fi is that I can send a separate set of data at a higher frequency. So let's say this is a higher frequency radio wave, and I'm going to send a different set of data over that. And I can do that at the same time. So exactly the same time. So I've got two different frequency bands that I work on, which can send data at the same time. And these bands are called channels. So in this example, let's say that this one is channel 1. So everything there is channel 1. And everything down there is channel 5. And they're nice and separate. They are nice and separate. So a channel is the idea that it is a range of frequencies that you can operate within. The problem that I might have, let's say I'm using channel 1 at the moment to browse Netflix. And then I'm sharing Wi-Fi in the house with my kid brother, and he comes in and he starts playing a computer game, some sort of first-person shooter or something. And his wireless device that he's doing that on uses channel 2, which is right next to channel 1. The problem is this starts happening. These waves start to get mixed up, and that causes all sorts of problems. So they're all mixed up now. So let's say this is our first-person shooter game, and that is called interference. It's sort of like the idea you might have heard of before when we have Wi-Fi or radio signals sort of going through walls and we lose bits of data. The exact same thing is happening here. I've got two channels which are too close together. They overlap in the range of frequencies they use, and that results in us losing data. And any time that we lose data through to interference, that means that we end up with a reduced bandwidth. And reduced bandwidth means that we have less data that we can send at any particular point. And that means if you're watching Netflix, then all of a sudden the quality of the video you're watching will reduce massively because you can't carry as much data to make a good quality video. So just a quick recap, you got the idea of frequency. So that's a number of times that a signal repeats in a given second. That is measured in gigahertz. We have the idea of channels. Channels are a range of frequencies you can broadcast data on. If we have two channels which are too close together, then they can overlap, and that can result in interference. And that's the main things that you need to know about Wi-Fi.
Now Mr. Holton's told you all about Wi-Fi and Ethernet, you're going to go and attempt your first task, which is based on a Wi-Fi analyzer. You've got 10 minutes. Now it's time to see how you did. We're going to go over to Mr. Barnes, who'll review the task.
Okay, so let's have a little look at this task we've just asked you to complete. On the left hand side, we've taken a sort of screenshot of a Wi-Fi analyzer app. This app basically shows all the Wi-Fi networks that are in range and their signal strength. So you can see we've got 4 networks. You've then been asked to answer the following questions and justify your decision. So let's start with which Wi-Fi network has the strongest signal and why? Okay, so the strongest signal is the one with the biggest curve because it's got the least sort of interference, or it's got the biggest signal strength. So based on this, Apple Store Wi-Fi, has the strongest signal. Now, the question is why? Why might that be? Well, it's probably a safe assumption that that is because it has the least interference, or it is the closest network. Okay, so next thing to have a look at then, so which network has the weakest signal? Okay, so based on the logic before, you'd probably say just about the yellow network, flat 564. So flat 564, so 546 even, has the weakest signal strength. And for a similar reason that the other one is the strongest, it either has the most interference or is the furthest away. Okay, so then along the bottom, Wi-Fi networks, on a standard Wi-Fi network we've got 12 channels, and the question here is which Wi-Fi channel is likely to get the most interference and why? So the key thing to look at here is how many networks are working on a particular channel. So if we look at channel 1, you've only got the yellow network. Channel 2, you've got the yellow and the green. Channel maybe the red. Channel 3, you've got the green and the yellow and the red. But more than likely, they're on the edge of the range. So more than likely here, you're probably looking at channel 5, although it could be argued otherwise. So channel 5 is likely to have the most interference. Okay, and this is because there are a number of networks using this channel. However, that being said, you could probably make a reasoned argument for another channel in that case. It's all about how many networks are using that channel. Okay, final question then. If you were creating a Wi-Fi network, what channel would you put it on and why? So looking at this Wi-Fi analyzer, channels 1 to 9 already have at least one network that may use that channel. So there's more than one right answer here. It could be any of those channels 10 to 12. So I could write channels 10 to 12 as there are not any networks currently using these channels. The general overview of Wi-Fi networks is the more networks you have using a particular channel, that's going to require the frequencies to be split up between them, and therefore you might get more packet collisions, more interference, and so on and so forth. The distance from the network is obviously going to affect its strength as well.
In the next task, you're going to look at some comparisons between Wi-Fi and Ethernet. For this task, you've got about 10 minutes. Off you go. And now we're going to go back over to Mr. Barnes, who'll review your answers.
Okay, so for the second task, you were to try and compare wired, so Ethernet or fibre optic, with wireless against these different factors, so bandwidth, installation cost, security, interference and mobility. So let's have a little look at that. So first of all, wired is always quicker than wireless. With fibre optic, you can get up to about 100 gigabits per second. Okay, with fibre. Alright, with wireless it's improved over time. You're probably looking at, in a normal household, up to 300 megabits per second in a normal house. But realistically that drops off quite quickly. Okay, so it has got lower bandwidth. Okay, in terms of installation then, for wireless, straightforward. Just need a wireless access point. Okay, but with wired, you need to run the cables. Be careful with health and safety. Okay, trip hazards, things like that. So installation can sometimes be a lot trickier. Okay, in terms of cost then, wireless, quite cheap. Just need to pay for the WAPs. So the cost of wired, because you're going to need things like switches, and on a large level that can get quite expensive. Switches can be thousands of pounds for proper commercial networks. So you've got the cables and the hardware costs. And also the installation costs. Quite often you're going to have to get someone to professionally install it. Okay, moving on to security. Well, with wired, security is quite good. Because if they want to get access to the network, they have to connect using a cable. So they have to be physically on site. With wireless, security is not so good. It's getting better. People can use packet sniffing and observe the network wirelessly. Okay. And they can also guess the password to your network. So, interference. Well, with wireless, you get interference from walls, other devices, and electrical equipment, which can lead to packet loss. With wired, you're not really going to get much interference because all the cables are wrapped to make sure that's so limited to no interference. Okay, and then finally mobility. So wireless, one of the biggest positives is it's very mobile as long as you're in range. Okay. However, with wired, you're stuck in that one place, so you're not mobile, as you need to be connected using a wire. Realistically, you're going to get asked maybe to either compare these in an exam or be able to say why one would be better over the other in a different situation or in a certain situation.
And that is everything you need to know about Wi-Fi and Ethernet for GCSE Computer Science.